The church bell tolled 12 times, each strike echoing like a hammer against the bones of Ember Hollow. I stood in the center of the square, boots sunk in dry dust, my palms raw from where the ropes had once held them. They'd removed the bindings, but left the accusation, and that clung tighter than rope ever could. The sky overhead was the color of burnt parchment. Thunder rolled in the distance low and slow, like God himself was thinking on what to say next. People circled me in silence. No judge, no trial. Just Reverend Harlan and his Bible cracked open to Exodus. A little boy had died 2 nights ago, fever so fierce he coughed up blood. His mother, Rachel Givens, now clutched her shawl like it might hold her grief in place. And beside her, eyes full of fire, her husband whispered to the man holding the shotgun. She gave him a tonic, Rachel said aloud, voice trembling. It made things worse. No, I said, hoarse from hours of silence. The fever killed him. The tonic was all I had. They didn't hear me. No, they did. They just didn't want to. A murmur passed through the crowd. Someone spat at the ground near my feet. Another crossed themselves. A girl I'd once delivered into the world turned her face away. I couldn't even blame them. We had arrived 5 years ago, my husband and I. Eleanor Voss was a doctor, a good one. Sharp-minded, always sketching anatomy in the margins of his journal. We came west with nothing but 2 trunks, a worn wagon, and hope tangled in every mile behind us. He died less than a year later. Snakebite, they said. But something about it never felt right. There was no bite mark, just sweat, seizures, and then stillness. He left me with no child, no savings, and a cabin on the edge of the woods that the townsfolk already thought was too far off to be decent. But I stayed. What else was there? I knew herbs, knew poultices and fever bark. Women came to me when babies wouldn't turn. Men came when bullets festered. And when Reverend Harlan preached against old ways and unnatural cures, they still came, quietly, always at night, until someone didn't come back. Now, I was the devil's bride, the forest witch, the woman who'd killed a child with bitter roots and whispered spells. You say nothing in your defense? The Reverend called out now, voice booming. I lifted my chin. My hands, once folded at my waist, now trembled by my sides. I was shaking, not from fear, but from how heavy it all suddenly felt. My defense? I said softly. I tended him when you wouldn't come. I stayed by his side while his own father drank, and when he died, I wept harder than either of them. Someone in the crowd cursed. Another called me a liar. Reverend Harlan closed his Bible. Eleanor Voss, you are hereby exiled from Ember Hollow. You will not return. If the sun rises and finds you still within our borders, then we will answer your evil in the way God demands. A few men raised their guns in agreement. That was the law here, whatever the loudest voice could carry and the rest could stomach. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. Instead, I walked. No horse. No wagon. Just a single satchel of belongings slung over my shoulder. I passed the schoolhouse where I once taught letters to little girls who now hid behind their mothers' skirts. I passed the trading post where they once bought my salves and teas with shy coins and grateful nods. Not one person stopped me, except one. An old woman, Martha Elkins, the midwife who'd taught me the craft before arthritis bent her fingers into knots, stood outside her porch and nodded once. Northwest, girl, she rasped. Toward the ravine. If you keep close to the cliffs, no one will follow. I paused. Why help me? Because I remember what it's like to be called things you ain't. And just like that, she closed her door. Night came fast. The sky cracked open with lightning as I crossed the town's edge. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. The wind smelled of rain and smoke. Each step on the trail felt like a heartbeat in my ears. By the time I reached the edge of the pine forest, the clouds had gathered thick and full. The first drop of rain struck my shoulder like a warning. The second kissed my cheek like farewell. I turned back once. Ember Hollow sat low against the hills, oil lamps glowing faint in the windows. That place had given me love once, and taken it. It had watched me help births and mend wounds, only to call me cursed when the winds changed. I pressed my hand to my chest, not in prayer, just to feel my own warmth, just to remind myself I was still there. And then I walked on, into the dark, into the storm, alone, but not broken. Not yet. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It came in thick sheets, soaking through my cloak, turning the dirt trail to paste. The woods beyond Ember Hollow weren't the tidy rows of trees I'd wandered in spring to collect bark and chamomile. These were deep ancient woods. Pines stood like watchmen, needles whispering overhead. The further I walked, the quieter the world became, until it was only the creak of wet leather on my boots and the sound of my own breath. By nightfall on the second day, my ankle was swollen and stiff. I'd stepped into a ditch covered in pine, needles, and heard the crunch, a sickening twist, not a break, but close enough to remind me I was alone. I limped to a thicket and crawled beneath the low boughs of a cedar tree, using my satchel as a pillow. Hunger clawed at my belly, but the pain was worse. I bit into my sleeve to stop from crying out, not because no one would hear, but because something else might. That's when I heard them, the soft shuffle of paws in damp brush. A low growl, breath caught. Wolves. At least 2, maybe more. The scent of blood, my own, from a cut on my calf, was thick in the air. I sat up slowly, heart slamming. My hand fumbled for the small knife I kept tucked in my boot. Another growl, closer this time, then crack. A gunshot split the night. The wolves scattered in a flash of fur and yellow eyes. Silence fell just as quickly, heavy and absolute. I stayed frozen, unsure which was worse, wolves or what had shot at them. Then I saw him. He stood like a ghost between the trees, his outline haloed in mist and moonlight. A rifle rested at his side. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn buckskin and oilskin, hat low over a weathered face. Maybe early 40s, maybe older. His beard was short and streaked with silver. His eyes, when I finally met them, were steel gray and unreadable. He didn't speak. He turned and started walking away. I hesitated. Then he stopped, half-turned, and tilted his head slightly. A gesture. Follow, or don't. I limped after him. The trail he led me down was steep and winding, over roots and slick stone until we reached a hollow between cliffs. Nestled in the rocks like it had grown there, stood a small cabin made of dark logs and river stone. No lantern, no smoke. Just the faint outline of a porch and shuttered windows. Inside it was dark until he lit a lantern. The flickering light revealed a space that was both Spartan and strange. Rifles hung on the wall, alongside knives and fur pelts. On a shelf sat dusty jars, bundles of dried meat. A workbench in the corner was scattered with gears, springs, and metal shards. Books lined a narrow shelf, all marked in symbols I didn't recognize. A map of the territory lay pinned to the wall, its edges worn and annotated in a hand that looked more like code than writing. He pointed to a low cot near the hearth. I hesitated, half expecting to be told to leave again once the rain stopped. But my legs screamed when I tried to stand straight. He crossed the room and returned with a basin, warm water, a salve, and a piece of cloth. Without a word, he knelt and removed my boot. I winced. He worked carefully, silently. The salve smelled of pine tar and comfrey. I recognized the ingredients. It was well made. Better than most town doctors could mix. He bandaged it neatly, then stood, grabbed a blanket, and tossed it onto the cot beside me. Then he walked to the back of the cabin, opened a door, and shut it behind him. That night I barely slept. He said nothing the next day either. I stayed quiet too, afraid to disturb whatever truce we'd stumbled into. I boiled water, rewarmed, the last of my dried root tea. Ate sparingly from what little he left out, mostly beans and jerky. He went about his day like I wasn't there. Sharpening knives, chopping wood, repairing a broken rifle scope with hands steady as a surgeon's. But he watched me, I knew. I could feel it every time I moved. I tried not to be a burden. I cleaned the pot, swept the floor, folded the blanket. When I pulled herbs from my satchel and began to carve dried bark into strips for tincture, he paused. He didn't ask questions, just watched. Late that evening, he brought in something under his coat. It was a hawk, wounded, wing bent wrong. He set it on the table without a word and stood back. A test, maybe. I took the bird gently in my hands, murmuring soft reassurances. With care, I examined the break, cleaned it, and began to bind it. When I glanced up, he was watching me, really watching me, for the first time. Still, he said nothing. The fourth night, I couldn't help it. Curiosity got the better of me. While he was out chopping wood, I drifted to his desk. I wasn't snooping. Not really. Just searching for something that explained him. That's when I found it. A photograph. Tucked between the pages of a leather-bound journal. It showed him, clean-shaven, younger, but unmistakably him in uniform, Union blue. Beside him, other soldiers, none smiling. Scrawled on the back, Blackmore, 5th Indiana Scout Battalion, 1865. I felt a chill. Not fear, but the weight of knowing. War changed people, some more than others. When he came back inside, I had returned to the cot pretending to sleep. He didn't mention the photograph and I didn't ask. The fifth morning he finally spoke. "You can stay till you can walk." His voice was gravel and smoke, deep, like it had been unused for a while. I nodded. "Thank you." That was all, but it felt like a door had opened. Days passed like drifting ash. Quiet, slow, weightless, until they weren't. My ankle healed faster, then my pride. I could put weight on it now, even walk the length of the clearing without wincing. But the ache inside me, what I'd left behind, what they'd said, still clawed at my ribs in the dead of night. I kept to my chores, busying my hands with salves, teas, feather-stuffed pillows. Anything to keep from thinking about the boy, Rachel's son, his fever, his eyes, the look on her face as she called me witch. It was the fifth night when the guilt finally boiled over. I was sitting by the fire, legs tucked beneath a blanket, stitching a patch on my satchel. Gideon sat across from me, cleaning a rifle with the same focus he gave everything. Precise, detached, careful. "I failed him," I said suddenly, voice barely more than a whisper. I should have known his lungs were too far gone. I should have. Gideon didn't look up, he didn't interrupt. I keep thinking about the tonic. If I'd just. "You didn't kill anyone," he said. I paused, startled by the firmness in his voice. He set the cloth down, eyes meeting mine across the firelight. "Fear did. That town's been afraid of anything it can't tame. You included." My throat tightened. I looked away, blinking fast. "You believe that?" I asked. "I've seen what real evil looks like," he said. "You don't even resemble it." It was the most he'd said to me since the night we met. I didn't respond, but something loosened in my chest, like a knot untied. Spring edged its way through the snow. Buds swelled on branches. The hawk, now strong enough to flap its wings, perched near the cabin door each morning, staring at the sky like it was asking permission to return. Gideon and I fell into rhythm. He showed me how to shoot, reluctantly at first. Said if I was going to stay up here, I might as well know how to defend myself. I was a poor shot at first, but steady with my hands. "You're better than most men I've served with," he muttered once after I hit a tin can square. I taught him too, how to steep bark for coughs, how to wrap herbs in muslin for aches. He didn't like the smell, but never complained. Evenings became easier. He'd stoke the fire. I'd cook. We had a routine. Once, I spilled beans all over the floor and cursed, loud enough to make the hawk jump. Gideon actually laughed, just once, low and gravelly, but it echoed like music in the little cabin. Some nights we didn't speak at all, and yet nothing felt missing. Just silence and the pop of firewood, the occasional owl, and a comfort I'd never known, not even when I was married. Eventually, I needed to replenish supplies. "I'll go with you," Gideon said. "You'll be noticed less." We rode into Dry Creek, a small trading post 2 hours west of Ember Hollow. I kept my hood up, hair tucked. Still, every time a man passed by, I tensed. When a woman narrowed her eyes at me, I felt heat crawl up my neck. Gideon noticed. Said nothing. The trip went without trouble until we loaded our bags and turned to leave. A voice behind us rang out, loud with recognition. "Well, I'll be damned. Thought you were dead, Blackmore." We turned. A tall ranch hand, Frank Dugan, stood. On the porch of the feed store, jaw slack, gaze locked on me and her. He added, stepping closer, "Ain't that the witch they run out of Ember Hollow?" I didn't speak. Gideon stepped forward once, no words, just a stare. Dugan chuckled but backed off. Still I knew, rumors were like prairie fire, fast, blind, and always hungry. 2 nights later, the first smoke signals came. Not literal smoke, whispers. The witch lives with the mountain ghost. Blackmore's gone mad hiding her, something unnatural in those woods. Then came the real trouble. A boy, 8 years old, vanished from a homestead near the edge of town. His mother claimed he went walking in the woods. By morning, they'd decided he'd been taken. By me. The logic didn't matter, just the fear. I was chopping kindling when I heard the first shot, not close, just distant thunder. But Gideon heard it too. He froze, then walked inside. When I followed, he was already moving, rifle across his back, revolver loaded, saddlebags tossed near the door. "Do you think they're coming?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked over to the weapons chest and opened it slowly. Inside lay a smaller rifle, wood-polished, well cared for, lighter than the one he used. He turned to me, silent as always, and held it out. My hands hesitated. "I'm not afraid," I said. "A lie." My fingers trembled as I took it. He nodded. That was all. Outside, thunder again. Louder this time, but not from the sky, from the valley. Men, horses, and torches. The sky began to pale with morning light when we heard them. First the crunch of hooves over frost-hardened ground, then the low murmur of voices, tense and righteous. And finally, torches, flickering points of orange like a second sunrise edging over the trees. Gideon stood at the cabin window, jaw clenched, rifle in his hands. I sat on the edge of the table, boots laced, breath steady. My rifle rested across my lap, though I doubted I'd use it unless there was no other way. We said nothing as the first shadows appeared. Men on horseback, men on foot. 20, maybe more. All from Ember Hollow. At their center stood Reverend Harlan, cloak whipping in the wind, Bible clutched like a weapon. They stopped just beyond the clearing. For a moment, no one moved. Then the Reverend stepped forward, voice loud and clear. "Eleanor Voss, you were warned. You defy the will of God and the law of this town. Come out now, and we'll end this clean." I stood slowly, but Gideon reached the door first. He opened it with quiet force and stepped into the morning. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rippled through them. Some recognized him. Others had only heard the stories. The war scout who disappeared, the ghost on the mountain. The sheriff moved beside the Reverend, hand resting on his holster. "This ain't your business, no. More, Blackmore," the sheriff called. "We're here for the woman." Gideon raised his voice, gravel and thunder. "That's my wife you're after." The clearing fell silent. I stepped out beside him. I didn't look at the men. I looked at their wives, at the boys too young to hold rifles, at Rachel Givens, pale and hollow-eyed in the second row. "I'm not a witch," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I'm not cursed. I'm not the devil's hand. I am what this place made me. I gave everything to your sick, your wounded, your mothers in labor. I bled for you. And when you got scared, when things went wrong, you found me easy to blame." I looked at Rachel. "I held your son's hand until he passed. No one else did." Something shifted in the crowd. Small. Quiet. Then, a voice slurred, rough with drink. "Liar!" A man stumbled forward. Dugan, the ranch hand from Dry Creek. Drunk. Red-eyed. He raised his pistol, wild and shaking. Everything slowed. The shot rang out. Gideon moved faster than thought, shoving me down, blocking my body with his own. The sound of flesh struck by lead cracked the air. He staggered, dropped to one knee. Blood bloomed across his side like rust in water. "No!" I screamed, catching him before he fell. Another shot fired, not from Dugan, but from the sheriff, hitting the drunk square in the shoulder. He dropped like a stone, but I was already pulling Gideon down, hands working fast, mind clearer than it had ever been. His eyes fluttered. "Still with me," he rasped. "Of course," I said. The bullet had missed his lung but torn through muscle. I tore open his shirt, packed the wound with crushed goldenrod and clean gauze from my satchel, pressed hard. The crowd stared, not moving, not interrupting. They watched me save him. And then, "Eleanor," a child's voice. Heads turned. Down the path came a horse, small, shaggy, foam at the mouth. On it rode a boy no older than 10. Dirty, scratched up, but alive. The missing boy, he slid off the horse, running to his father in the crowd. I got lost in the woods. I followed the wrong trail. The father collapsed to his knees, gathering the boy into his arms. Silence fell heavier than before. No witchcraft, no abduction, just a child lost, and now found. The sheriff looked at Reverend Harlan. The preacher's lips moved, but no sound came. He turned, walked away without another word. One by one, the others followed. No apology, no justice, just the long, shameful shuffle of people who'd come to burn a woman and found no fire left in her. We stayed on the porch until the last rider disappeared. Gideon rested against me, pale but breathing steady. I held a cloth against his side, refusing to let go. "You called me your wife," I said quietly. He smiled, faint and crooked. I figured it'd slow them down. I let out a soft laugh, wet, broken, grateful. "Still want to stay up here?" he murmured. I looked around at the trees, the smoke still curling from where a torch had dropped. The hawk wheeled overhead, free and watching. More than ever. Months passed. The seasons shifted again. Buds turning to green. Green to gold. Gideon recovered slow but strong. He limped for a while, then didn't. We worked side by side, mended fences, traded for supplies, grew quiet roots neither of us spoke aloud. At the trading post, people stared less. Sometimes they nodded. Once, a little girl offered me an apple. Another time, an old man tipped his hat and said, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Blackmore." I didn't correct him. I just smiled,